Hi and welcome. My name's Tim Titchmarsh, .netarchitect.co.uk, IronSpeed MVP. Today we're going to talk about the application wizard in IronSpeed version 10. First thing you do before you create a project or an application is to use the wizard to get you going. You can of course come back later and reuse the wizard halfway through to change settings, so don't be worried if you don't get all the settings correct first time through. You can always come back. So we go to the File menu, choose New Application. Let's go past the opening page to the page style. On the left you'll see a number of page styles, modern styles, which is new for 9 and 10. We're going to pick one. I've created one myself called .NET Architect based on an existing theme. So you may be familiar with that one from IronSpeed. And then we go next to the database server. I'm going to use Microsoft SQL because that's what we tend to develop in-house, but of course you may be using a different server. On the left there we've got a choice: MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server, Azure and Microsoft Access. So once you know your database server, and we're going to type that into the box here, and then we're going to test the connection. Okay, and that worked just to save us getting to the next stage and realizing we can't find the server. I'm using Windows authentication, but if you need to use a specific login in SQL Server, you can type in the username and password as appropriate. Moving on to the next step takes us to the tables, pages. What we need to do is to select which tables out of our database server we need to work with. I'm going to pick the BizBlocks database, and in there I could pick any number of tables to get me going. Now if you were new to IronSpeed, you probably just want to keep those to a few so that you're familiar. The more you choose, of course, the more pages get generated, the longer it takes. So start off small and build up bit by bit. Once I choose my tables, let's just pick one now to keep it simple. I'm going to choose the billing table. Instantly on the select pages to create section you'll see a number of pages that IronSpeed will create. So for a data entry there will be an add record, and as I click on each one you'll see on the right hand side a small preview appear just to give you an idea of that type of layout. So we have data entry forms, we have reports which tend to be read only, and again there's different layouts of how you want that to appear. As I move through you can see how they change. Then we have workflow, which is a different type: search and edit, search and show, etc. And then there's a series of mobile pages specifically designed for mobile devices. I'm going to keep it simple and just leave the 7 default ones. Well, you may be asking yourself, well, where do those 7 defaults come from? What if I don't want to show, or I do want to show mobile? How would I set that up? Well, on the dialog itself there's an options button, which when I click means I can set up the application generation options. Okay, and this is something you should do before starting your application, because there are some options which apply straight away and others that you can keep changing. But of course if you're creating pages you'll want to know the options before you create the page rather than subsequently when you've already created the page. So this is a good time to set those up. There is a video on just these application generation options because there are so many. But just to give you a quick flavour, we've got the menu, related options, there's a few in there, new page and chart options, and application options. Okay, so for the application options, the web page options, what do I want to see? You can see as you drill down you'll see different layers, different levels, and there really are, I think it's about 280 odd options. I would thoroughly recommend you spend the time getting to know those, because this will save you time in the long run. Each time you generate an application, if you don't want certain pages, this is where you turn them off. Okay, you can then use the apply as defaults for new applications. Subsequent applications then would share those initial startup options. Just another setting on here which is interesting is the page location. Okay, normally as you can see it's set to table name, such that if you don't supply a name there and leave it as it is, then the pages are created within the directory given by the table name. But if you wanted, say, certain pages to appear in an admin folder, then you could change that page location to admin. But of course you have to change it to a directory that already exists. Okay, by default IronSpeed has set those up so you don't need to change them before you start. So we're going to leave them as is for now and just move on to the next step. Okay, this page is all about virtual primary keys and virtual foreign keys. Now, if your database has been set up correctly, you probably find you won't need to add any of these at all because the relationships would have been established in the database. But what if you can't get access to the database? What do you do then? Well, with IronSpeed you can actually add a virtual primary key and a virtual foreign key in code. And IronSpeed will enable you to choose the fields as the virtual primary key, which could be one or more fields. So you've got a compound key, and then you can set up the virtual foreign keys. Okay, that way IronSpeed takes notice of that information, and when it builds the pages, it adds the correct panels, the correct relationships are added. You can, of course, add your own ones if, for example, IronSpeed didn't detect any missing. There may be some that you wanted to override IronSpeed's sort of initial suggestion on that and add your own ones. Okay, so we don't need to add any, so we can move on to the next step. The next step is all about languages. Okay, now if you're in the United States, then you'll be picking the United States for your language. And all you do is click on the left and move it across. If you're Australia, for example, you can click Australia, move it across. Okay, I'm in the UK, okay, and I've got my settings already because that's my default. The more you select at this stage, the more you get to choose at runtime when you run your application. So if you did want a French and a German, American, Canadian, whatever, and you wanted the user to be able to swap between the languages at runtime, then this is where you set them up. And what actually happens is certain resource files where the information regarding to labels, so for example the label that appears on a save button or a OK button or a cancel button actually comes from a resource file, which is a small file that IronSpeed creates, that .NET understands, that creates and contains the language definitions. I'm just going to keep it simple. In fact, let's just put in there a French one. That might be interesting just to show you what I'm talking about. So let's pick the French one. So when I run the app, I expect to see a French and an English choice. Let's do the next, and now we're into our application settings. Give the application a name. Well, I'm going to store mine just to start us off in just a temporary folder, and you'll notice as I type in, okay, let's just expand that slightly. So I've got my application name, where it's going, fairly straightforward. You can't overwrite an existing application, so if you have got one, you'll need to remove it from the directory before you start. Application type can either be a website or a web application, or web application for SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2007. You can only have one of those, of course, so I'm going to leave it at website for .NET. Next choice is the code language, C# or Visual Basic .NET. We tend to use C# in the majority, but you can change that to VB if you wish. Bear in mind, you can come back subsequently and change the language of choice, but any custom code you've written, of course, won't get updated. So try and get that choice correct right from the get-go. Saves you a lot of grief later, and you won't need to convert any of your custom code. The .NET framework should handle 4.5, 4.0 and 3.5 depending on the version of Visual Studio that you may be using as well. Of course, you don't need Visual Studio to use IronSpeed, but if you have got Visual Studio, you can choose the .NET framework as well. SQL generation, whether you want to use stored procedures or inline, again that's a sort of choice. Whether you've got access to the database or not may dictate that choice. Advanced gives us the opportunity of creating a namespace, so you might have my company, for example, my test app. Once this is set, you can't change it, so again this is a good time. It's one of the few settings that you must change and must get correct before you start, because you can't change it later. Virtual directory name is the name that is found in IIS. So if you're using localhost / my test app, then that would work. Of course, IronSpeed makes use of the developer IIS, so you don't need to worry about setting up your own IIS. IronSpeed will use the developer one as default. Once your settings have been changed, you can then hit the next button, which gives you a bit of a sort of, this is what we're going to do. So once we're happy with that, we can click finish, and IronSpeed will now go away and create the application. So let's see what it does. First thing it's going to do, as you see the progress here, is it's going to create and generate certain files. After it's generated those files, it will then do a build and a compile, and at the end of that it will then run the application in your favorite web browser, and you should see, here we go, up it comes. We're going to have information there, and as you can see in the URL, we've got our local host with a port number. It's using the developer IIS, as we said earlier. So here's my application, fairly straightforward. Okay, here we've got the choice. Remember, I have English and French, so if I want to change, let's just show you one of the buttons in English. Actions and filters, as you can see, and as you move across them, they're in English. If I now change that to, let's say, French, I expect my tooltips to change. Okay, so once we've got the application set up, you're on your way, but of course you can go back. If I cancel this, let's just put this into live preview so we can see it embedded within IronSpeed, and then I'm going to bring up the application wizard. So back to design mode. Let's go back to this time we're on the tools, application wizard. If I don't like the theme, I can change that to something different. Move through the different stages. Again, I can add new fields, new tables, new layouts. I can add a new language if I want to add something different. Application settings, let's do a .NET, VB.NET. Next, finish. It's going to tell me that there's going to change the files and any settings will be lost. I'm not worried about that because we haven't actually created any custom code yet. And obviously you can keep going back into the application generation wizard and keep changing until you get the look and feel and how you want it just right. There's the new theme in place. Okay, fairly straightforward, fairly easy to use. There is information on the IronSpeed website about how to use the application wizard and the options. As I say, the options are available from the wizard, as we mentioned earlier. There is a video demo, and we hope you found that useful. There is quite a bit in there, but as I say, it is online, it is in the IronSpeed help. There is the video as well, of course, and but we hope you found that useful and just gives you a taste of what the application wizard is and how to use it in IronSpeed version 10. My name's Tim Titchmarsh, .netarchitect.co.uk. Please come to the website if you need additional information, videos, help, guidance. We'd be more than happy to help you. Many thanks for tuning in and look forward to talking to you soon.